What if the world is just reflecting back the energy we're putting into it? And we've had way more control over that reflection than we ever realized. Welcome. You know, that idea has stopped me in my tracks when I was reading about this notion that our inner state is so visible that people respond to us before we even say a word. And what if we don't just talk about that? What if we lived it, studied it, and rebuilt our life around understanding it? Today, in part one of a conversation, I'm going to dig into what actually means to become familiar with your feelings, how that awareness changes the way you move through the world, and why your internal landscape might be the most powerful tool you have. So, let's do that. Because
I have questions.
I have questions.
I have questions.
I have questions. I have questions.
I pity the fool that doesn't have questions, which I do.
today I get to sit down with someone who has lived several lifetimes worth of creativity, curiosity, and reinvention, all in one body. After years of doing what life tells us we're supposed to do, she hit that moment of, wait, did I really come all this way to this planet just to get a mortgage and a 9 to 5? And instead of ignoring that question, like many of us do, she followed it. That journey led to her book and course, 12 Creative Steps to Fulfilling Life, and to a deeper understanding of purpose. Not the Pinterest type of purpose, but real purpose, real soul level kind. She's a certified life coach, an award winning novelist, a creator, a guide, and now a musician. Well, she was a musician, and now she reinvented herself into another musician with a brand new single called Here as Love under the name Emily Play. She's originally from the UK, now living her life in New Zealand, raising 2 teenage boys, creating, questioning, remembering who she is, and helping other people do the same. I'm beyond honored and so happy to welcome Emily Pattullo. Welcome to I Have Questions. How are you doing?
Oh, thank you so much. What an introduction. I'm doing really well, thank you. After
Awesome. Well, you know, I don't know. I like doing introductions. It's probably the only thing I'm really good at on this show. So I figure I better get going on it. So, so
great.
Emily, for everybody who wants to know, Emily is in New Zealand now, and it is the next day for those of us in the United States. So that's kind of cool. I like that. So Emily, are you ready?
I am ready.
Awesome. I'm so glad. If you're willing to indulge me just a little bit more, I would like to talk just a little longer. I'd love to read a paragraph of yours that has jumped out to me and absolutely spoke to me. So it's something you've written. I don't know when. I think it was on a LinkedIn thing that you've done, but it's this quote. And soon I began to realize that if I'm feeling amazing in myself, I smile and radiate that good feeling towards everyone I meet, and am usually met with the same. If I'm feeling down and awful and I'm scowling at people, then likely I will be gifted a similar response. I may as well have how I feel tattooed on my forehead, because the way I feel and therefore operate out in the world as a result is palatable to everybody, whether they realize it or not. That is the power of each of us. So, how do I harness it so that I always present out into my environment in a way I hope others will reflect back to me? By becoming very familiar with my feelings and how they affect my behavior, by realizing that it starts with me, that in order for there to be harmony in my life, there must be harmony within me. End quote. Emily, I don't even know if I have an actual question after this. It's, maybe I've spent a number of years pushing myself and anyone else that will listen to be curious about the world. But this paragraph has kind of made me reassess that push of mine, and has made me, I think, realize that having the most curiosity about ourselves is maybe the most important part. Is was that part of your intention in writing this, or I threw this at you, so welcome.
Absolutely. It is, I guess that's the foundation of how I hope I operate now, because I realize that everybody is always busy doing out there, and there's not nearly enough time and focus in here. And one of the things I trained in is bioenergetics, which is understanding the personality in terms of the body and its energetic processes. So what that means is recognizing that how you behave in the world is in direct response to how you feel.
Mm-hmm.
And so rather than feel something and go out into the world and get busy kind of making this better and that better and doing this and doing that in order to try and change the feeling, you go inside and look at the feeling itself. And so the more you work with that and the body and take ownership of everything that you're feeling and therefore doing in response, the more you get really good at understanding yourself and how you reflect out into the world for other people.
Yeah, awesome. So in essence, uh, we kind of spend our whole lives putting band-aids on things instead of actually going deep inside and figuring out why we feel the way we do. I love that. That's I don't know. I think it was meant to be that I ran across that paragraph of yours. It just, as soon as I read it, I'm like, oh, this is where we're starting today.
Thank you.
So it was perfect. So I'm gonna go back a little bit, and do this, because as I've followed you and read about you, uh, I have to ask this. When I introduced you, you're a certified life coach, you're an award-winning novelist, you're a musician, you're a parent, you teach. So if someone asks you, what do you do? How do you even answer that?
Um, I call myself a compulsive creator.
Ooh, I like
I
that.
I can't not create something. Um, it is part of who I am, I think, and also it's one of my biggest beliefs is that being in the power of creativity, no matter what that looks like for you, is also the most amazing way to emulate out into the world and to impact other people. Because I believe that creativity is fundamentally what makes humans human.
Hmm.
And for everything else that comes down the line and AI and everything, they will never create from the heart and soul like we can. And so for us to do that as much as possible all the time, I think is going to just remind us of how powerful we really are and give us back our sense of autonomy and
Mm,
sovereignty, where perhaps we might have lost that along the way with everything out there that looks so much kind of better and more efficient than we probably feel most of the time.
yeah, yeah. Compulsive creator. Can I steal that? I like that.
Please do, yes.
I really do. So let's kind of back up a little bit from here, because your journey wasn't like everyone's, isn't a nice straight road. So I, I'm sure you've spent lots of time exploring the question, why am I here? What am I doing? Why am I here? Do you Can you pinpoint a time? I guess I'm assuming this is a question maybe you've asked yourself. I think it sounds like it would be, but can you pinpoint a time when you first was like, all right, I can't escape this anymore. Why am I here?
Well, I remember being very discontented right from being at school and, being sort of forced into being a certain way and doing things a certain way and wishing there was, at that point it was more of a wishing there was more to life than this. And then as I went on and went through school and tried lots of jobs and did various things. I couldn't believe that this was why we came. Did we really come all this way to this incredible planet? I mean, look at it, just to get a mortgage and get a good job. Do you know what I mean? All those boxes that you supposedly are meant to tick, only to get to a point where you retire and live out your days until you die. I mean, to me, that is so boring. And I know for myself, I would not have come just to do that. So I sort of went out to explore, and I listened to what other people were saying, and I went on my own journey around it. And I about 6 years ago, I upped and moved my family from England to New Zealand 3 weeks before the first lockdown.
I was going to say 6 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, so it was quite the introduction to a new country on the other side of the world, I can tell you, and it turned my life upside down and inside out. And I think, although I'd started on this journey quite a long time before I came here, that change was kind of the ultimate sort of shake up of everything that I'd ever known before. And so that I think for lots of people, it was a big life changer.
Yes.
So I think that at that point was probably when I started thinking about writing what I wrote and stuff, just to make sense of it all, I think.
So your the book 12 Creative Steps to Fulfilling a Life kind of started with that move and COVID, or had you been working on it prior to that?
No, it hadn't. It sort of fell out of the sky on my head. I wasn't actually intending to write it. I've written a couple of novels, which was what I thought I was doing, and which I really enjoy doing because, you know, like I said, I just can't not create something. And so I did those. But what sort of occurred to me when I was writing, because I wrote one of them here in New Zealand, what occurred to me was that I take my characters of my book on a journey, and where they are at the end, hopefully, if it's a good book and a good story, is very different to where they are at the beginning. And so I started to think to myself, well, if I can decide where my characters are going and what they're doing and what they experience and make their lives better, why can't I do that for myself? So I sort of took myself down a path of, okay, let's just say that I'm living a story here, and this is just one of many experiences that I might be having in my extensive existence. And if it is just one experience that I'm having, perhaps I get to choose how it rolls out. And so I started to entertain the idea that perhaps I am having my own journey and my own experience down here. And rather than listening to what everyone out there is telling me I should be doing, perhaps I have a little bit more choice than I thought I did. And so it just kind of started from there, just for myself. This was kind of before the book came along, of playing around with it. Okay, so this has been presented to me. And as I was going along, because I knew about how my body operated and the energetics around it, and how you feel inside is directly reflective of how your life looks on the outside, I started playing around with how I felt in my body. And if I could change how I felt about that thing, could I change the actual physical reality of it? And I'll give you an example. I have always been, up until recently, really bad with houseplants. I would always kill houseplants. With that, I mean, every single one I ever had died. And I had this narrative going on where I would tell people I kill houseplants.
Yep.
And so that was my narrative. And then one day I was like, well, what if I stop saying to everybody, including myself, that I kill houseplants, and start saying, oh my goodness, I'm amazing with houseplants. They flourish when they're around me. And so I changed that narrative and therefore the way I felt about it. I now have a house full of houseplants, very, very beautifully and thoroughly growing very well houseplants. So, you know, I started playing around with that, and it actually is the same with cooking. I used to be really bad at cooking, or say I was really bad at cooking.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not bad at cooking. I'm really good at cooking. Things like that. It's just changing my attitude to it, and my own kind of come from the place that I'm coming from as I am feeling these things, and also the words that come out of my mouth have completely changed and dictated my path, my journey.
Yeah. So you're truly telling everybody, which is something I believe in, is we are the authors of our own novel.
Yes.
Right, we are. And one of the things that really caught my eye, Emily, is, well, two things. One, our daughter's name is Emily, and two, though, when she was a freshman in high school, which sadly it was 20 years ago already, uh, um, she came home one day from school, and classic first year in high school, young girl trying to navigate the world and struggling. And she came home one day and just said, you know what, I'm going to be happy at school. As a 15-year-old or 14-year-old, whatever she was, she announced to us that she was done not being happy. And uh, I just marveled at that as an adult. I'm like, can you really do that? And she, for the most part, pulled it off, right? And she just kind of changed, reinvented herself. And so I just find, our brains are so much more powerful than we give them credit for, and our bodies, right? If you're like me, you're already thinking about your own snapshot, what your life looks like right now, what you wish it looked like, and what feelings show up when you put those two pictures side by side. What I love about this first part of my conversation with Emily is how naturally she reminds us that creativity isn't just something we do. It's a way of listening to ourselves. It's a way of noticing what our body is trying to tell us and what our life is trying to show us, and what we've maybe been avoiding for far too long. Hold on to that thought, because next week in part two, we go even deeper. Next week, in our conversation with Emily, we shift from the framework of the 12 creative steps into the heart of her personal story. The music, the detours, the dreams that went quiet for a while, and the moment she decided it was finally time to stop waiting and start creating again. If you wouldn't mind stop waiting and being creative, I would love it if you would go to my page, like, subscribe, and even comment or share what I'm doing. That would mean the world to me. It's free to you, and it would do a lot to make this page even more curious and ask more questions. With that, I hope you have a great week. I hope you stay curious and keep asking questions. Hey, P.S. I was recently reading a book about spying in Italy during World War II. It's called Beneath the Scarlet Sky by Mark Sullivan. Great book. I sped read it. I couldn't put it down. And while I was reading it, though, I became more and more curious about codes and code breaking and spying. And, I did some research, and I knew just a very tiny little bit about this before, but, imagine this, picture this, a young Native man in 1942, maybe he's Navajo, answering the call after the Marine Corps sent recruiters onto his reservation. Maybe he's a Comanche, one of the 17 men who helped guide Allied forces during that chaos of D-Day. Maybe he's Hopi, Seminole, Miskawaka, Choctaw, one of more than 30 different tribes whose languages would become lifelines on distant battlefields. He's standing in a makeshift communications tent. The air is full of sweat, dust, and fear, and the radio crackles, and a message comes through. Not in English, not in codebook cipher, not in Enigma, but in the language his grandparents had taught him by firelight. And he translates it instantly because he knows that every second matters. Those were the code talkers, the men whose languages had survived forced assimilation, boarding schools, and government bans, now becoming the most secure military code of the entire war. The Navajo code talkers alone developed a system of over 400 terms, memorized entirely. No written notes allowed. Their messages traveled from command to front line in seconds, not minutes, not hours, and not one was ever broken. Think about that. Not one. On Guadalcanal, their speed saved Marines pinned down by the enemy fire. In Iwo Jima, Major Howard Connor famously said, "Were it not for the Navajos, the Marines would have never taken Iwo Jima." In Europe, Comanche code talkers transmitted messages during the Normandy invasion while shells exploded around them. And yet, when the war ended, they went home in silence. Their work was classified until 1968. Some families didn't learn the truth until their fathers and grandfathers were old men. But they carried that silence, as expected, with dignity. That same dignity their cultures had taught them long before the world realized how much it needed them. And here's the part that stayed with me while I was doing that research. Those very languages someone once tried to erase, but they became the languages that helped win a global war. The identities someone tried to suppress became shields for thousands and thousands of soldiers. The voices someone tried to silence became the strongest, safest codes on earth. So as you step away from this episode, I want to leave you with one question. What part of yourself have you been holding back? And what might happen if you finally let it speak? Because history reminds us that the quietest voices can carry the strongest codes, and the greatest strength often comes from places we least expect, deep inside ourselves. Peace, love, R.